Next is gendered occupational segregation. This continues. It is about gender norms, but we think it's also because care of people is not perceived as a skilled occupation. So some initiatives are addressing public perceptions about the skills and value of service occupations overall. Many programs are geared to train and support women into non-traditional occupations and trades, and obviously this is positive, but we argue that there will always be more women filling in behind on the jobs that these women have left. So the strategies must also address the employment conditions for the service workers, the female occupations, the domestic workers, the carers, because you can't just move women into non-traditional work. We also need to really look at how to improve conditions for all informally employed workers. This is where women is concentrated. Informally employed workers have almost always no social protection, no labor regulation or enforcement of that, minimum wage laws and other things like that. So the strategies include the government, clearly, but also new forms of organizing, how to organize informally employed workers by sector, as SIWA has done, WeGo, HomeNet, Maria Elena Quadra, there's many organizations, really reinventing the traditional workplace collective bargaining type models of organizing. And beyond that, they've often run media campaigns about the rights of informally employed workers and the contribution to the economy, and built also multi-stakeholder initiatives, including religious leaders, government entities, other women's rights organizations, and even global companies and brands. The last area is productive assets. Women's assets are crucial to help them manage risks and crises, as well as diversify livelihoods, to leave violence, and also research that shows this increases community resilience. And what we wanted to say is that each decade it seems that there's a new solution for by promoting a new asset for women. So it's credit, it's mobile phones. But actually asset distribution to women and girls have seldom been sustainable over time without significant change to the power of women's collective action, women's representation in decision making, and social norms. So you have to do the parallel work. The technology itself just doesn't work. Now I'm going to pass on to Anam. And I will move your slides.
Thank you, Thalia. So just to summarize on the common characteristics of effective strategies that Thalia has discussed. So to tackle critical problems, effective strategies need to address economic, social, as well as political domains of empowerment. We also see that groups matter, and collective action matters. Stronger women's rights movements are a consistent factor of success in sustainable change in these types of broader societal change. However, a trend that we see globally is that the funding for women's rights organizations has been decreasing in the context of shrinking civil society space that is posing a real threat for organizations wanting to promote this work and connect with and empower local movements. We also see that systemic approaches are needed, so thinking about these change processes from the individual to the household, to the national level, within specific contexts of conflict, climate change, and fragility, and across material, social, and cultural dimensions, as well as other forms of inequality, so class, ethnicities, and incomes. In the recent process of the high-level panel on women's economic empowerment, there's finally been agreement on two underlying structural issues that need to be acknowledged and prioritized as key drivers of women's economic empowerment. And these can also help explain why progress has been slow or limited in some of the areas that Thalia highlighted, and are kind of the sticky barriers, which Paul mentioned yesterday in the opening session, that reflect and also sustain unequal power relations. And the first is dominant macroeconomic policies, and the second is discriminatory social norms. So I'll speak a little bit about each. So as we've been discussing, and we had a very heated session yesterday on this, discriminatory social norms in the economy negatively impact women's time, their mobility, access to resources and rights, and occupational segregation, as well as influencing important policy and investment decisions. So what are the trends? We see that there is some, although limited progress, gender attitudes and norms towards women working in the paid labor force have become more positive over time. In the recent Gallup survey across 142 countries, 70% of women and 66% of men said that they would prefer that women work in paid jobs, which is more than double the percentage that said that they would prefer that women work, or rather stay at home. However, when economically challenging times arise, both men and women said that jobs should be given to men, and they deserve preferential treatment over women in their search for employment, paid employment. But what we're really more interested in are also norms about the economy itself, which are more insidious, yet have received little attention in women's economic empowerment programming and research. So what do we mean by these? These are shared beliefs around which economic activities have value in the economy, what is considered work versus leisure, what is considered skilled versus unskilled, which may not be linked to the cost of production or to the benefits to consumer. For instance, norms that care work is not work, that administrative jobs are not as important to the economy as jobs involving financial or data analysis. And as an example from Oxfam's research, where we asked respondents to rank common activities by value and skills that they perceive are required, men rank productive work activities higher than women, and women care activities higher than men. But all respondents, so men and women, ranked people care as low skilled. So tending farm animals was perceived to be requiring more skills and more valuable than caring for the elderly, the ill, or disabled, or children. So importantly, these norms do not only exist in the social sphere, for instance, in the communities or households that we work with, but also within institutions. The reason why, for instance, somebody mentioned yesterday, there are these norms around investments in social services not being considered as investments, but as consumption. And these then influence the levels and types of service provision and important policy and investment decisions. So what are some of the promising strategies for shifting social norms in the economy? So to explore this question, Oxfam, together with the SEEP network, formed a practitioner learning group which brought together organizations from the private, the public, and the NGO sector. And one of the challenges we identified was, how do we shift social norms at scale? So beyond the individual level. And we found that in order to achieve social norm change at scale, we need to work at the household and community level through awareness raising and engaging positive role models to challenge both the descriptive norms that, for instance, men do care work, as well as the injunctive norms highlighting the benefits of why they should do more care work. So more equal distribution of care work, the benefits not only to women, but to children, to families, and the wider community. But at the same time, to achieve change at scale, we need to move beyond the household and community to adopt innovative strategies for working at the public and the institutional level, through the media, through social marketing, and public and private sector advocacy to shift those institutional norms. So one of the ways in which Oxfam has been tackling this is through working with Unilever Surf to develop new products and services that address heavy and unequal unpaid care work, but also importantly to break stereotypes through their advertising and campaigns and setting new norms about women's and men's work. We also need more research on norms about economics, as gender norms are much better understood and researched. And as well, research like the ILO or Gallup poll are good about understanding what people think currently or at the moment. But we need context-specific research evaluating how social norm change is happening and what are some of those strategies that we can adapt and adopt. So on the second barrier, so feminist economists, some of whom are in this room today and I have great respect and admiration for, through their research have shown that macroeconomic policies are not gender neutral. They have distributional effects as they're based on a conceptualization of the economy that ignores the non-monetized economy and is not based then on the evidence from the entire labor force, but only a part of the labor force. And based on the sort of narrow objectives of economic growth and other material or market-based criteria, these policies have in many cases undermined the achievement of women's rights and perpetuated economic and gender inequality. And we heard from Diane Elson yesterday about how gender-biased macroeconomic policies have particularly devastating impacts in times of austerity, where cuts in social security, social services, public sector employment, increased direct taxes impact women negatively, particularly poor and ethnic minority women who've seen their real incomes decline and their unpaid care and domestic work responsibilities rise simultaneously. So quite the opposite of what we're proposing in terms of outcomes. Next. And we also heard from Diane Perrins how fiscal policies, particularly public investments in care-related infrastructure and services, can be a powerful tool that governments can use to help achieve gender equality outcomes, recognizing that inequalities in unpaid care and domestic work are in a way sort of the nexus of these other inequalities, and hence addressing those can have a multiplier effect on health, education, and other outcomes. And this is also an area that women and men themselves prioritize. So according to the Gallup survey of this year, globally men and women mention the balance between work and family as one of the top challenges that women working in the paid labor force in these countries face, followed by lack of affordable care for children and relatives. And there's a lot of research around this highlighting these benefits. So Oxfam's research